Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! In the dimly lit bedroom, the sunrise sneaked in, its rays stubbornly infiltrating through a barricade of blinds. A battle-scarred veteran, his alarm clock, displayed the time, 6:30 a.m. From under a duvet of warmth, a hand burst forth, poised to eliminate the intruding beeps. He staggered to the bathroom. His gaze met a mirror image, a face weathered with the mysteries of time. Stubble adorned his jaw, a rugged brow, features crafted with an artistic edge. A canvas belonging to Emmanuel, a 30-something analyst, a corporate soul entrapped in the strings of everyday routine. The comfort of a stable job and home offered no solace to the tempest raging within. Am I lost in a stranger's realm? He breathed these words into the steam-filled air, questioning his own reflection. Nothing had worked. The persistent discomfort remained, whispering that something fundamental about his existence was misaligned. After years of research, therapy sessions conducted in secret, and countless nights lost to online forums where others shared similar stories, Emmanuel had finally named the feeling gender dysphoria. The relief of identification had been quickly overshadowed by fear. What would this mean for his carefully constructed life, for his relationship with his traditional family, for his future? 3 months ago, he'd made a decision. If becoming feminine would finally bring peace, he would pursue it with the same methodical determination he brought to every project. He'd created spreadsheets, budgets, and timelines. He'd researched medical options, voice training techniques, and wardrobe essentials. He would transform himself completely, and in doing so, maybe finally feel at home in his own skin. The first appointment for laser hair removal had been terrifying. Emmanuel had sat in his car outside the clinic for 20 minutes, nearly driving away 3 times before forcing himself through the door. The pain had been intense, but oddly validating. A physical manifestation of the emotional discomfort he'd carried for decades. Now, after several sessions, he ran his fingers across his smoother cheek. Progress. Small, incremental, but undeniable. Emmanuel opened the medicine cabinet, revealing a neat row of pills. He swallowed his daily hormone therapy with a handful of water, then began the meticulous morning skincare routine he'd adopted. Cleanser, toner, serum, moisturizer, sunscreen. Each product carefully selected after hours of research. Work remained a challenge. Emmanuel maintained his male presentation there, though he'd begun growing out his hair, which now reached just below his ears in soft, auburn waves. He'd explained the change as simply wanting a different look, though the curious glances from coworkers suggested they sensed something more significant underway. In the evening, Emmanuel's real life began. He'd rush home, shedding the confining button-up shirts and slacks that felt increasingly like a costume. Tonight was no different. He unlocked his apartment door, immediately loosening his gray tie and kicking off the uncomfortable dress shoes. The small second bedroom had been converted into what Emmanuel thought of as a transition space, both literally and figuratively. A clothing rack held a growing collection of feminine items, 3 floral blouses in varying pastel shades, 2 pink sweaters, a navy blue A-line skirt, and several pairs of women's jeans carefully selected to flatter his figure as it changed. A vanity table displayed an expanding collection of makeup, arranged with the same precision he brought to his professional work. Emmanuel changed into yoga pants and a loose t-shirt, then settled at the vanity. He unpacked a small bag from the day's shopping, a new tube of lipstick in a soft rose shade. The sales associate had been kind, asking no questions when he'd explained it was a gift for his sister. The lie had come easily, after months of practice. He opened his laptop and navigated to a voice training video he'd been following. The instructor's gentle guidance filled the room as Emmanuel repeated phrases, recording himself and analyzing the playback with critical attention. His natural baritone was gradually softening into something gentler, though the transformation required constant awareness. "The rain in Spain falls mainly on the plain," he practiced, focusing on the melodic rise and fall the instructor had demonstrated. When he played back the recording, Emmanuel smiled. "Progress here, too." The doorbell's sudden ring jolted him from concentration. Emmanuel wasn't expecting anyone. He quickly closed the laptop, glancing around the room for anything he needed to hide. The lipstick. He tucked it into a drawer before heading to the door. Through the peephole, he recognized his co-worker, Michael, holding what appeared to be work files. Emmanuel took a deep breath, running his hands through his auburn hair in a futile attempt to make it appear more masculine.
"Just a second,"
he called, trying to lower his voice back to its original register. Michael's surprise visit was brief but unsettling. He'd stopped by with project specifications Emmanuel had requested, apologizing for the unexpected intrusion. Emmanuel had stood awkwardly in the doorway, not inviting him in, conscious of his softened appearance and the room of feminine items just down the hall. "Your hair's getting pretty long," Michael had commented with a curious glance. "Yeah, just trying something different," Emmanuel had replied, taking the files quickly. After Michael left, Emmanuel leaned against the closed door, heart racing. How much longer could he maintain this double life? The calendar on his refrigerator had a date circled in red, 3 months away, the day he planned to emerge fully as his true self. Until then, he would continue this careful balancing act. Later that night, Emmanuel sat cross-legged on his bed, scrolling through online shopping sites. His finger hovered over a baby blue sundress. It was simple, but elegant, with a sweetheart neckline and flowing skirt that would hit just below the knee. He imagined wearing it on a warm spring day, perhaps at the farmer's market or a cafe with outdoor seating. Would people see him as he truly felt? Or would they immediately identify him as someone in transition, subject to stares or worse? The question haunted him as he added the dress to his cart, along with a pair of white sandals with delicate straps. The total made him wince. Another significant investment in this transformation that had already cost thousands. But if this was the key to happiness, what price was too high? Emmanuel fell asleep that night with his hand resting on the smooth skin of his cheek, dreaming of the woman he was becoming. The woman he'd named Jolie, after his grandmother's middle name. In his dreams, Jolie moved through the world with grace and confidence, accepted and at peace. The vision sustained him through the difficult days ahead. The next 6 weeks passed in a blur of appointments, practice sessions, and careful shopping excursions. Emmanuel's hair continued to grow, now reaching his shoulders in soft, auburn waves that required new products and styling techniques. He'd begun wearing it pulled back at work, citing the awkward growing out phase as his excuse. His body was changing too. The hormone therapy was redistributing fat, softening his features, and creating subtle curves that required increasingly creative wardrobe choices to conceal at work. Emmanuel had started wearing slightly looser dress shirts and had invested in special undergarments designed for people in transition. The baby blue sundress had arrived, along with the white sandals and several other carefully selected items. They hung in the spare room, tags still attached, waiting for the day when Emmanuel would fully become Jolie. That day arrived sooner than planned. Emmanuel's phone rang on a Tuesday evening as he practiced applying eyeliner, a skill he found particularly challenging. The caller ID displayed his mother's name. They spoke weekly, conversations that had grown increasingly strained as Emmanuel evaded questions about his changing appearance during video calls. "Hello?" he answered, quickly wiping away the makeup. "Emmanuel, is that you? You sound different," his mother said. Emmanuel cleared his throat, dropping his voice lower.
Just a little cold, Mom. How are you?
The conversation proceeded normally until his mother delivered unexpected news. She and his father had decided to visit the following weekend, a surprise they thought would delight him. "We haven't seen you in almost a year," she said cheerfully. "Your father has a conference in the city on Friday, so we thought we'd stay through Sunday and spend some time with you." Emmanuel's hand tightened around the phone. "This weekend? That's really soon. Is there a problem? Do you have plans?" No plans, it's just..." Emmanuel glanced around at his apartment, at the evidence of his transformation visible in every room.
"I was thinking of doing some renovations. The place is a mess."
"Oh, we don't mind. We can help. Your father is quite handy, you know." After the call ended, Emmanuel sat in stunned silence. This visit could derail everything. His parents were conservative, religious people who had made their views on transgender issues abundantly clear over the years. The thought of them discovering his transition before he was ready sent waves of panic through his body. He had 3 days to decide: revert temporarily to a more masculine presentation, hiding evidence of Jolie, or accelerate his timeline dramatically. The former option felt like a betrayal of the progress he'd made, a step backward into the discomfort he'd been working so hard to escape. The latter terrified him. He wasn't ready for such a significant confrontation. Emmanuel didn't sleep that night. By morning, he'd made his decision. He would not hide Jolie away. Instead, he would take a week's vacation from work, beginning immediately. He would use these days to complete his external transformation, and when his parents arrived, they would meet the real person their child had always been. The email to his supervisor cited a family emergency. Then, Emmanuel made another decision. He wrote a second email to Human Resources, explaining his situation and his intention to return to work following his vacation as Jolie. The company had policies protecting gender identity, but policies and reality often diverged. Still, it was time. With these decisions made, a strange calm settled over Emmanuel. He'd mapped out a schedule for the next 3 days. Final shopping for essentials he'd planned to acquire gradually, an emergency appointment with his therapist, practice time for voice and movement, and mental preparation for what would likely be the most difficult conversation of his life. The shopping trip was both exhilarating and terrifying. Emmanuel purchased items he'd been saving for later stages. A simple silver necklace with a small pearl pendant, several pieces of everyday jewelry, additional makeup, and feminine hygiene products. The salespeople were kind, particularly a young woman at the department store who seemed to intuit his situation and guided him toward flattering choices without comment. "This shade would look beautiful with your auburn hair," she'd said softly, holding up a moss green blouse. "And it's very much in season." Emmanuel had added it to his growing collection, grateful for the simple acceptance. The appointment with his therapist, Dr. Marshall, was less comforting. "You're accelerating your timeline significantly," she noted, concern evident in her voice. "Are you sure you're emotionally prepared for this confrontation?" Emmanuel ran his fingers through his auburn hair, a nervous habit that had persisted through his transition.
"I don't have a choice. They're coming whether I'm ready or not."
"You always have choices." Dr. Marshall reminded him gently.
You could delay this disclosure. Maintain your male presentation for their visit.
And set my progress back by months? Live a lie when I've finally started to feel authentic? Emmanuel shook his head.
I've spent 32 years hiding. I won't do it anymore. Not even for a weekend.
Dr. Marshall had nodded, then spent the remainder of their session equipping him with strategies for the difficult conversations ahead. They role-played potential scenarios, practiced calming techniques, and discussed boundary setting when faced with potential rejection.
Remember,
she'd said as their time ended,
their reaction reflects their limitations, not your worth.
The words echoed in Emmanuel's mind as he returned home to continue preparations. He practiced walking in the white sandals, applied and reapplied makeup until his hand was steady, and recorded his voice repeatedly, working to maintain the higher register consistently. On Thursday afternoon, Emmanuel, now fully embracing the identity of Jolie, stood before the full-length mirror in the baby blue sundress. The woman who gazed back had soft features framed by shoulder-length auburn hair, subtle makeup enhancing rather than masking her natural appearance, and eyes that held both fear and determination. "Hello," she said softly, her voice higher and melodic after months of practice. "I'm Jolie." The white sandals added a slight height, and the pearl pendant drew attention to her neck, where an Adam's apple had been prominent before but now appeared subtly reduced through the effects of hormone therapy. She turned slowly, examining herself from different angles. Not perfect, perhaps, but authentic in a way Emmanuel had never been. The doorbell rang precisely at 6 o'clock on Friday evening. Jolie had spent the day alternating between calm preparation and waves of paralyzing anxiety. She'd changed outfits 3 times before returning to the blue sundress. It felt right to meet her parents as the woman she'd envisioned when she first selected the garment. Jolie took a deep breath, checked her appearance one final time, and walked to the door. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for the knob. This moment would divide her life into before and after. Whatever happened, there would be no returning to Emmanuel, to the careful pretense and profound discomfort of her former existence. The door swung open. Her parents stood in the hallway, suitcases beside them, expressions shifting from anticipation to confusion as they took in the woman before them.
I'm sorry,
her father said, checking the apartment number.
We must have the wrong...
Recognition dawned in her mother's eyes first. "Emmanuel?" Jolie swallowed hard, summoning every ounce of courage she'd cultivated. "I go by Jolie now. Please come in. We have a lot to talk about." The conversation that followed was excruciating. Seated on the living room sofa, still in her blue sundress and white sandals, Jolie attempted to explain a lifetime of dysphoria to parents who struggled to comprehend even the basic concept. Her father sat in stony silence while her mother cycled through confusion, anger, and tearful accusations.
Is this because we didn't let you play with dolls? Because I made you join baseball?
Her father finally asked, breaking his silence with questions that revealed how fundamentally he misunderstood.
No, Dad. This isn't about toys or activities. This is about who I am, who I've always been.
You were always a normal boy, her mother insisted, dabbing at tears with a tissue. Quiet, maybe a little sensitive, but normal. I was never normal, Mom. I was in constant discomfort, trying desperately to be what you expected instead of who I am. The conversation circled painfully,
with brief moments of potential understanding, quickly overwhelmed by ingrained beliefs and fears. When her father suggested they get help to fix this, Jolie finally stood, the white sandals firm against the hardwood floor. "I am getting help. I'm working with medical professionals and therapists who understand that this isn't something to be fixed. This is me becoming whole." Her parents stayed in a hotel that night, rather than in the guest room Jolie had prepared. They agreed to return the following day to continue the conversation, though the stiff formality of their goodbye suggested they were retreating to regroup rather than to reflect. Alone in her apartment, Jolie collapsed onto her bed, still fully dressed. The confrontation had been every bit as difficult as she'd feared, yet beneath the emotional exhaustion lay a surprising sense of relief. She had faced one of her greatest fears and survived. She had stood in her truth, however poorly received. The expected text came at breakfast time. Her parents would not be returning. They needed time to process and would be heading home early. Jolie read the message twice, tears blurring the screen. She had anticipated rejection but had hoped for at least a second conversation, a chance to help them understand. With her parents' departure, a strange emptiness settled over the weekend. Jolie had cleared her schedule for their visit and now found herself with unstructured time in which to fully inhabit her authentic self for the first time. She decided to venture outside. The farmer's market had been part of her vision when she first purchased the blue sundress. Now, despite her nervousness, she applied her makeup carefully, styled her auburn hair with gentle waves framing her face, slipped on the white sandals, and left her apartment. The morning was bright and warm, perfect for the sundress. Jolie walked with deliberate steps, constantly aware of her posture, her gait, the way her hands moved as she spoke to vendors. Most interactions were brief and unremarkable, exactly what she had hoped for. She purchased fresh flowers, locally made bread, and heirloom tomatoes, carrying them in a canvas tote bag looped over her arm. No one stared. No one questioned. She was simply another woman enjoying the weekend market. The realization brought tears to her eyes as she stood examining a display of handcrafted jewelry. "Are you all right?" the vendor asked, noticing her emotion. "Yes," Jolie said, her practiced voice steady. "I'm just having a significant day." The vendor smiled warmly. "Well, significant days deserve a little something special, don't they?" She held up a bracelet of delicate silver links. "This would look lovely with your dress." Jolie purchased the bracelet, allowing the vendor to clasp it around her wrist. The simple, kind interaction felt monumental. Her first purchase of feminine jewelry as her true self, from someone who saw her only as the woman she was. The weekend passed in a series of such small victories. Jolie visited a cafe, ordered a latte, and sat reading a book on the patio. She browsed clothing stores, trying on dresses and blouses without the pretense of shopping for someone else. She exchanged pleasantries with strangers who called her Miss and Ma'am without hesitation. Yet beneath these affirmations lurked a persistent unease. Jolie had expected the external transformation to bring immediate internal peace. She had believed, perhaps naively, that aligning her outward appearance with her inner identity would resolve the anxiety and depression that had plagued her for decades. Instead, as Sunday evening approached and she contemplated returning to work as Jolie the following day, familiar patterns of anxious thought emerged. What if her colleagues rejected her? What if clients refused to work with her? What if her technical skills were suddenly questioned because of her gender presentation? Jolie stood before her bathroom mirror, auburn hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, face clean of makeup. The woman who gazed back was recognizably herself, yet the anticipated sense of wholeness remained elusive. "Why am I still afraid?" she whispered to her reflection. "Why don't I feel fixed?" Monday morning arrived with cold reality. Jolie selected a professional outfit she'd purchased for work. A moss green blouse paired with a navy pencil skirt, subtle makeup, small pearl earrings to match her necklace, and low-heeled black pumps that had required hours of practice to walk in comfortably. Her auburn hair was arranged in a neat twist, professional, yet feminine. The office fell silent as she walked through the door. Jolie had coordinated with Human Resources, who had informed her team of her transition, but seeing was different from hearing. Curious eyes followed her to her desk, where she found a small plant with a card signed by several colleagues. Michael approached first, the same coworker who had noticed her growing hair months earlier. "So, not just a different hairstyle, huh?" he said, attempting humor to bridge the awkwardness. "Not quite," Jolie replied, grateful for the effort despite its clumsiness. "Well, you look nice. Very professional." He gestured vaguely at her moss-green blouse. "That color suits you." The day proceeded with similar interactions. Colleagues making efforts of varying success, some overly enthusiastic in their support, others maintaining polite distance. Her supervisor, a woman in her 50s who had always been fair but reserved, stopped by Jolie's desk in the afternoon. "Your work has always been excellent," she said without preamble. "I expect that won't change." "It won't," Jolie assured her. "Good. That's all that matters here." She hesitated, then added, "If anyone gives you trouble, let me know immediately." The support was welcome, yet as Jolie rode the elevator down at day's end, the persistent, hollow feeling remained. She had survived her first day as her authentic self in the workplace. Colleagues had been generally accepting. Her parents' rejection had been painful but not unexpected. By any measure, her transition was proceeding successfully. So why did she still feel the same underlying dissatisfaction that had driven her to transition in the first place? The question haunted her as weeks passed. Jolie settled into her new life with increasing confidence. Her wardrobe expanded from necessity items to pieces chosen purely for pleasure: a crimson dress for an office party, comfortable jeans and sweaters for weekends, delicate lingerie that made her feel both feminine and powerful. Her auburn hair grew longer, now reaching past her shoulders, and she experimented with different styles. Externally, the transformation was complete and successful. Jolie moved through the world as the woman she had always known herself to be, generally accepted and increasingly comfortable in her presentation. Yet the depression that had shadowed Emmanuel lingered, shifting form but refusing to dissipate entirely. 2 months after her full transition, Jolie returned to Dr. Marshall's office. The therapist listened attentively as Jolie, dressed in a lavender blouse and gray slacks, her auburn hair loose around her shoulders, described the persistent emptiness. "I thought becoming Jolie would fix everything," she admitted. "I thought the dysphoria was the source of all my unhappiness, but now I'm living authentically, and I still have days when I can barely get out of bed, still have panic attacks before social events, still feel incomplete." Dr. Marshall nodded thoughtfully. "You addressed a fundamental misalignment in your identity, which was necessary and important. But transition isn't a panacea for all psychological distress." "Then what was the point?" Jolie asked, frustration edging her voice. "I've lost my parents, spent thousands of dollars, endured pain and judgment. For what? To still feel broken?" The point, Dr. Marshall said gently, was to become who you truly are. That's a prerequisite for healing, not the complete solution. Now that you're living authentically, we can address the anxiety and depression directly, without the complicating factor of gender dysphoria. The conversation marked a turning point in Jolie's journey. She began to understand that her transition had been necessary but insufficient, a foundation upon which to build mental health rather than an instant cure. With this recognition came both disappointment and a new kind of hope. Over the following months, Jolie worked with Dr.
Marshall on issues that transcended gender identity, childhood experiences of feeling different and isolated, perfectionistic tendencies that drove her professional success while undermining her personal happiness, difficulty forming deep connections due to years of maintaining emotional barriers. She joined a support group for adults with depression, where she met diverse individuals struggling with similar challenges despite vastly different life circumstances. Among them was Clara, a divorced mother of two with a warm laugh and insightful perspective that drew Jolie's attention immediately. Their friendship developed gradually, beginning with coffee after group sessions and evolving into weekend hikes and movie nights. Clara knew about Jolie's transition. She had shared her story with the group, but it was rarely the focus of their conversations. Instead, they discussed books, debated politics, exchanged career advice, and supported each other through difficult days. "You know what I like about you?" Clara said one evening as they sat on her porch, watching the sunset. "You're doing the work. So many people never even try to understand themselves, let alone change what isn't working." Jolie smiled, running her fingers through her auburn hair that now reached the middle of her back. "I thought the work was becoming Jolie. Turns out that was just the beginning." "Isn't it always?" Clara replied. "Every time I think I've figured myself out, another layer appears." 6 months after her parents had walked out of her apartment, Jolie received an email from her father. It was brief and formal, asking if she would be willing to meet for lunch when he was in town for business the following week. Jolie agreed with trepidation, selecting a quiet restaurant where they would have privacy for what would surely be a difficult conversation. She chose her outfit carefully that day, a deep blue dress that conveyed both femininity and strength, paired with simple silver jewelry and the now familiar white sandals that had become something of a talisman. Her auburn hair was arranged in a simple twist, showcasing the earrings that had been a gift from Clara on Jolie's birthday. Her father appeared older than she remembered, his posture stiff as he approached the table where she waited. He hesitated before sitting, eyes taking in her appearance with an unreadable expression. "Thank you for meeting me," he said formally. "Of course," Jolie replied, her practiced voice now natural after months of use. The conversation began awkwardly, with her father asking superficial questions about her work and apartment. Gradually, he revealed the purpose of the meeting. Jolie's mother had joined a parents' support group at their church, surprisingly led by the mother of another transgender person. The experience was slowly shifting her perspective. "She's not ready to see you," he admitted, "but she wanted me to tell you that she's trying to understand." "And you?" Jolie asked, her heart racing. "Are you trying too?" Her father stared at his untouched water glass. "I don't understand any of this. I don't know if I ever will." He looked up, meeting her eyes directly. "But you're my child. That hasn't changed, even if everything else has." It wasn't acceptance, not fully, but it was an opening, a small crack in the wall of rejection that had seemed impenetrable. Jolie reached across the table, offering her hand. After a moment's hesitation, her father took it. "You look healthy," he said finally. "Your hair, it's your mother's color,
I know, Jolie said softly. I've always had her hair. The lunch ended without dramatic reconciliation, but with a tentative agreement to continue communication. Her father would return to her mother with news of their meeting, and they would proceed slowly from there. It was more than Jolie had dared hope for. As summer transitioned to fall, Jolie continued building her new life. The friendship with Clara deepened into something more, proceeding with the careful consideration of two people who had experienced significant heartbreak. Jolie was open about her fears, about the persistent anxiety that sometimes still gripped her despite medication and therapy. We all bring our baggage, Clara told her during a particularly vulnerable conversation. The question is whether we're unpacking it or just dragging it behind us. Jolie's relationship with her parents improved incrementally. Her mother eventually agreed to video calls, though she still struggled with names and pronouns. Small steps forward were often followed by setbacks, but the direction was consistently toward healing. At work, Jolie received a promotion, recognition of her continued excellence regardless of her gender presentation. The moss green blouse she'd worn on her first day as Jolie became something of a good luck charm, reserved for important meetings and presentations. 1 year after her full transition, Jolie stood before the same full-length mirror where she had first seen herself complete in the baby blue sundress and white sandals. The woman who gazed back had changed in subtle ways. Her auburn hair was longer, her stance more naturally confident, her eyes clearer and more peaceful. The blue sundress still fit perfectly, a physical reminder of how far she had come. Yet, Jolie understood now what she hadn't then, that becoming her authentic self had been necessary but insufficient. The real work had been what followed, confronting childhood wounds, developing healthier thought patterns, building genuine connections, and learning to accept both joy and pain as part of a fully lived life. Her phone chimed with a text from Clara, confirming their dinner plans. Jolie smiled, slipping the phone into her purse. She had once believed that becoming Jolie would solve everything, that external transformation would bring internal peace. The reality had been both more challenging and more rewarding than she had imagined. The dysphoria was gone, replaced by the comfort of living in alignment with her true identity. The depression and anxiety remained works in progress, managed through ongoing therapy, medication, and the daily practices she'd developed. She was not fixed. She was healing, evolving, becoming. As Jolie stepped out into the autumn sunshine, auburn hair catching the light, white sandals clicking against the pavement, she embraced the complexity of her journey. Becoming herself had not been the end of her struggles, but rather the beginning of an authentic life in which those struggles could finally be addressed honestly. And that, she had learned, was the real transformation.
Thanks for watching, my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!